and that hasn't happened. Is it the intention to do that in executive session? And if so, I would argue against that. I would argue that he threw this out there for everybody. He made actually baseless allegations in front of the media, in front of the audience at this MTA board, and that should certainly not be discussed in executive session. It should be discussed very openly. If he feels so strongly that a special prosecutor is necessary, have the debate right here in front of everybody, because I really would enjoy that.
So, Commissioner, the subjects of the executive session include that matter. Yes, sir.
So when I objected last at the special meeting to you going into special session or executive session with the exclusion of the labor reps, I was given an explanation under the New York State Public Authorities Law as to why that's happening. What's the explanation for this? It doesn't involve contract negotiations. It doesn't involve anything inherently labor related. And in fact, it's following up on an issue that was thrown forth to the media in a blindside manner. And now it seems like you're skulking off into executive session to have this conversation and continuing to slag MTA workers in the most inappropriate manner.
So, Commissioner, you raised an excellent question. We considered it, and for the executive session discussion of the matter that you just referred to, our labor partner non-voting members are up.
But why? Why not have it in front of the public, in front of the media? What's the point? If you discussed it, what's the rationale not to do that?
So, Learned Counsel, Commissioner, gives me 105 of the, what was this? Open meeting.
Mike.
Sorry, no, Mike's on actually, sorry about that. So 105 of the Open Meetings Law, Section C, I'll read it, information relating to current or future investigation, et cetera, as to which might imperil effective law enforcement if disclosed. That's the reason, but labor partners are welcome.
So let me just continue to ask you a question. First of all, I understand there's a motion on the floor that's not been voted on yet.
Correct.
Right, so we're in a discussion period. So was the request for a special prosecutor done because Larry Schwartz had knowledge of investigations that are going on? Or right now, are you going into executive session because you have knowledge of investigations going on? Because as far as I'm concerned, and I think the other labor reps as well, we've not been informed of any formal investigation. There's absolutely no evidence at all that's been presented to us, or I believe anybody else on the board. It's just been kind of hot air allegations that were initiated in the media.
So,
and I would put forth one more thing.
Forgive me.
These folks that came up from Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions have certainly produced a heap more evidence regarding potential corruption at the MTA than Larry Schwartz did when he spoke about overtime. And in fact, Larry Schwartz's assertions about overtime flew in the face of everything that the agency president said after he made the allegation. Every single one of them said that there is no common thread of systemic overtime abuse, and then Bob Ferran gave a report with a perfectly clear rationale as to why overtime spiked in 2018, primarily because of the Subway Action Plan and similar plans, although they don't have that fancy name perhaps, on the railroads. So how is this not in the realm of public debate?
So, Commissioner, let me respond in two ways. I have not had a chance to read the Cures document. I will read it after the meeting. I am inclined to refer to the MTA Inspector General for review. I think that's an appropriate thing to do. With respect to your first point, I can confirm an investigation which is pending, which is that of the MTA IG with respect to overtime and time and attendance matters.
Okay, so if there's an investigation pending by the IG, what's the necessity for a special prosecutor? Because the U.S. attorney's involved now, very capable. They've rooted out government corruption very successfully over the last few years. The Queen's District Attorney's involved. The Inspector General is involved. And, what's the point?
Well, Commissioner, the only one I can confirm is the one I just mentioned, which is the MTA Inspector General, which I think is appropriate. Beyond that, I think it'd be inappropriate for me, at least, to have this discussion in a public meeting relying on 105C of the Open Meetings Law.
Right. So the only thing that you're aware of is an Inspector General investigation that we are aware of and that we've cooperated with. How does that trigger an executive session regarding allegations, completely baseless allegations that have not been supported with any evidence whatsoever, for an executive session on this matter, rather than have a public debate in front of everybody? It's certainly we're the ones who Larry has attempted to put under the gun. We're the ones who are willing to have this debate publicly.
If I can I piggyback before anyone else turns their mic on? So here's the bottom line, Chairman. This is a continuing to send a negative message, not only now to our employees, but to the public. That you're inviting us to go in a room in the back, which I'm more than welcome to debate it, but we don't want to do it in front of everybody that may be asked to spend millions of dollars in an investigation. A continued slap in the face to labor when I thought I heard multiple board members last week say, let's get labor in the room and work it out. Let's work together and get this done. So we're gonna take the easy route. You're gonna allow us to scream in the back room, but no one else is gonna know the outcome and how it all happened. But we will let our memberships know how this board ends up voting, and we will continue to do our very best to keep our workforce in check. But I do not know how much more abuse we can take. We have an Inspector General's office to do this. So we're gonna throw more money in an investigation. The IG is gonna continue to have their staff, because I'm sure we're not laying anyone off there. We have management across all the agency out there tripping over themselves to figure out a way to try to cut overtime when it's impossible to do. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, this board can't continue this attack on labor. It is not going to go well.
Pat, if I may, I'm sorry, Veronica, you have your hand up. If I may, I want to add one more thing that might not be obvious to everybody in the board, but it's obvious to every single frontline railroad and transit worker. When you put forth a baseless allegation about criminality, fraud, overtime abuse, we're already getting assaulted to the tune of 3-4 a week. When you put that idea out there that transit workers and railroad workers are criminals without any evidence, all you're doing, our own employer is doing is putting targets on our back and subjecting us to further harm's way than we're already in. And I would put forth that going into executive session only lends to that idea that somehow there's a threat of criminality among transit workers and railroad workers that simply doesn't exist by the acknowledgement of your own agency presidents. And just done without any evidence whatsoever. So you go into executive session, everybody's gonna walk away with the inference that there's something going on here that there's not. You talked about an Inspector General investigation, fine. We have over 50,000 unionized workers at the MTA. If the Inspector General catches 4 or 5 or 8, you talked about 5 Long Island Railroad workers or railroad workers that were disciplined for overtime. That's 5 out of 55, 60,000 unionized workers. That's not a common thread. There's no systemic abuse there. And we have processes in place to deal with that. And further, I'm going to reiterate that the U.S. Attorney's Office is involved in this. The District Attorney's Office is involved in it. The Inspector General is involved in it, although they were denigrated a little bit by Larry in the Wall Street Journal today, which I'm sure they appreciated. There is absolutely no need whatsoever to go into executive session. If there's going to be a debate about the necessity for a special prosecutor, do it right here. This is crazy. The public deserves to hear what you have to say.
So Commissioner, let me say this. First, I made comments at the special board meeting a Friday ago. I stand by my comments. I do not believe that there is widespread, systematic overtime fraud.
And you contradicted Larry, so thank you.
I didn't contradict Larry.
Yeah, you did, because he went on CBS News and said there's systemic overtime and abuse.
I don't watch TV. So Commissioner, too young.
That boy is lying
I stand
right there.
by my words. On the other hand, we're a public agency and have a responsibility to act as responsible stewards with respect to every dollar. And I think that all the labor members around the table would agree with that. The MTA Inspector General is doing an investigation. I think that's the appropriate thing to do. I'm not going to speak to the existence or non-existence, and your question earlier was very cleverly phrased, and I'm going to avoid responding to it.
Which one was that?
4 questions ago, John. I'm not going to respond to the existence or non-existence of other investigations, and I'll leave it there. If we've got further discussion, let's.
I just have a question for a point of clarification. My curiosity was piqued when you were referencing the law and you said it would potentially, it would imperil law enforcement. Can you explain that, please? I don't, just because I don't understand how this particular matter could imperil law enforcement. And given this robust discussion, I think that is worth explanation.
Commissioner, I think that question could only be answered.
We can't hear you.
So I just have one more comment. You spoke about an Inspector General investigation. As of right now, that's the only investigation that you've referenced. So when we go in that room in executive session, are you gonna put forth details of the Inspector General investigation and outcomes of the Inspector General investigation that you don't want the public to be privy to? Or is this gonna be a general discussion without any specifics being put forth? Because if there's not specifics being put forth relating to Inspector General investigations about overtime, then why would it be an executive session?
So, Commissioner, again,
Good question.
a good question, not one I can answer in public. I understand your reason for asking it, but I'm gonna politely pass.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Please.
This is clearly, I unfortunately would miss the emergency meeting 2 weeks ago for long planned family travel. But this seems like a conversation that we are willing to have in public, and we have been having in public. It seems to me that the chairman is making a point that there is something specific that he needs to discuss with the board in executive session. I think we should allow him to do that. It doesn't mean it stops a larger conversation for us to have with all stakeholders and in public. I wish I'd been a part of the emergency meeting last week or 2 weeks ago. I'd be happy to be a part of the conversation going forward, but it seems to me that we can do both of these things.
Is in fact there something that you are gonna say in specifically related to this investigation, or is it just in general?
John, I'm not in a position to answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Neil?
Pat, I've observed you as a chair, which has not been that long, but you have not been an abuser of executive sessions, and our vice chair has often made very clear to us when he has been privy to things that we should do things in public when we can. And I feel like I need to give our chair some discretion here, that if he believes there's something to be done in private, then we should do it in private. I will tell you that if we end up doing things in private that could be in public, then maybe we won't go into an executive session in the future. But that feels like that's the chair's prerogative to define that, and I think we owe it to him.
Is the scope of what we're talking about in there about overtime and abuse? That's what you wanna have that conversation about?
John, I can't answer.
So you're just gonna not answer questions then? So we may as well just go to executive session, because you're just gonna keep saying, well, I can't answer that question.
Look, I wish we
In
could.
front of the entire media, when you all triggered all of this.
Commissioner, I'll note the following. I think today we engaged in radical transparency with the discussion with Bombardier and Siemens on PTC. I thank Commissioner Zuckerman for his comment. I tried not to abuse in my 2 meetings, or 2.5 meetings. Tried not to abuse the open meeting exceptions. I'm going to commit to you, I'm going to continue to do that. I think as the Port Authority, with help from lots of people, we improve transparency. I think we need to do the same thing here, including getting board materials online to the board on director's desk and to the public earlier in the week before board and committee meetings. And I know.
Thank you.
I know we can do better.
Finally.
As before, I can't respond to your question.
Yeah.
Mr. Law.
I second your motion to go into executive session.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Yeah, this is a case where due process and burden of proof dovetail with good management and transparency. And it's also a robust discussion in public is the only way we can get to the bottom of the have you stop beating your wife yet character of this entire discussion, where we're guilty regardless of what.
As your friend, don't use that phrase, please. As your friend.
Even as my enemy, it's okay, I withdraw whatever I said insulted you.
Just that phrase.
No, just that phrase. Well, it's hard for me to put, I mean, it's how the guilt without prosecution, the guilt without investigation. That's the stuff that bothers me. I'm sorry I characterized it in a way that I don't even know how that bothered you, but I apologize for having bothered you with it. But we need the due process. It needs to be out in public. That's the only way these questions will ever be answered. As long as they're just hidden in the background, none of us are in favor of abusing overtime. That's, this is who's in favor of that. So who's in favor of abusing anything? There's a short line of people that are in favor of abuse.
Are you kidding?
All right, anybody else? We've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
To the media, you all should know it. It's the trade unionists in this room that want to have an open and public discussion about the allegations of overtime abuse and overtime fraud. And it's the bosses that want to skulk into the back room and have this conversation in private.
John, I just said I'd be happy to have a conversation in public, that I'd be happy to do it.
I'm actually not talking about you, Sarah.
Well, you just said to the media that the entire board and the bosses all want to go back. I'm telling you, I'm happy to have this conversation in public.
I take it back. It's not the entire board, it's the bosses.